Alright, and we're back. Video number 3. So the second video was front-end framework. I needed to deviate a bit to talk about that. Just for some work-related things. Some people were wanting to see some JavaScript work of mine, so I thought I'd deviate, get that out of the way. First video, we covered the basic history app framework, talked briefly about game assets or lack thereof. We talked about items, spells, and effects. I pretty much covered those in depth. I'm going to take these a little bit slower now because I do want to go more in depth and see a lot more code. I want to describe how the things work, but I also want to sort of show the code behind it and explain sort of the merits of them. I'm going to skip front-end message routing. That's more of a JavaScript thing. Chronologically, when I was building this a long time ago, one of the first systems was Melee Combat, but even before that was the Impulse system. I guess we can go Impulse system and then Melee Combat. Let's do that. So let me talk about the game loop. That's actually down here because they're very closely tied together. The main game loop, what keeps the game heartbeat going. I always wondered how the EQ emulator servers did their main game loop. Things happen in the game based on time. It's a MMORPG. Time moves. Things move in real time. I get it. There's game time which moves accelerated, but when your weapon has a 1 second delay between swings, you need to make sure that that entity can't attack again for 1 second. So how do you handle those types of things? And even more importantly, how do you handle it in a manner that is highly efficient? If you've got 200 entities all taking melee swings, they all need to be, one, accurate to their actual delay, and as soon as their delay is up and they're ready to swing again, they can swing at the earliest opportunity. And that all needs to be done, of course, efficiently so that when their time is ready, they actually can swing and they're not delayed simply because the game loop is taking too long. So I tried various different things. Some of them I remember, some of them I don't. I wanted to try sort of a native timer-related thing. Let me pull up Chrome here. I believe... Oh, yeah, PHP event timers. I initially thought this was what I wanted. I think I googled the right thing here. I could be wrong. But the more I looked at it, the more it just wasn't seeming right. And so I kind of came to the conclusion that I was going to have to just sort of build my own rudimentary, not timer system, but maintain a scheduled list of events that are in the upcoming future, and then iterate through that, each game loop. So let's have a look at that. I can describe it better by looking at this code is several years old. This game loop is several years old at this point. I've made small changes here and there and tweaks as necessary, but the nature of it is several years old, so bear with me. I've forgotten portions of it. So game, run, let's just follow the code path. Okay, here's a good place to start. Wow, one. Get the current time. Figured out a diff. Alright, so one feature of this particular game loop is that I can set a multiple, a rate, and I can make things move in half speed. This was kind of inspired. My brother recommended I do this. They do the same thing in Eve, I believe. If a zone becomes extremely overloaded to the point where the game loop actually can't keep up, it will dynamically adjust this sort of virtual rate where 1 second actually takes 2 seconds or maybe even longer, as a way to spread the load over time. And that is in here. I haven't really used it much, but at the time when I implemented it, I put it in there, I tested it, worked pretty well. But for now, the rate is a static 1 second to 1 second. Zone tick. I don't think that is the main game loop, but let me double check. Oh, it actually is. Yeah. So there's a class called Updater. Let's have a look. It's not that big actually. So yeah, less than 130 lines. So Updater has a whole collection of, where is it? Let's collapse this down. Updater, all updates. All right. So say you're an entity, you got a weapon on, you turn on your attack, and that means that every 1 second you get a combat round. Let's actually take a look at that. Melee PHP, attack on, and we'll see at what point the updater, here we go, schedule melee attacks. Here we go, emitter, update, is this here? Yeah. Schedule an update. So when the attacks get turned on, I talk to the updater class and I say basically, you know, in 1 second, you get to call this function here. And I wonder if there's something in here that says it's repeatable or something to that effect. Maybe not. Let's have a look back in Updater. Again, we're going to get into the weeds here in the code, and that's on purpose. So when an object will register itself, because later something, it's going to want to, when it, like you turn attack off, it needs to unschedule these updates. This update collection, all updates, needs to be kept as clean as possible, because this is being iterated a lot. Every possible game tick, it's being walked through. And I experimented with several algorithms to do this, including an interesting library. Forget that. Bring open this one. It's called PHP Data Structures, I think. Nope. Maybe this one. Yes. This is a custom add-on library that recreates some common, computer science, basic computer science input-output queues, your regular queues, stacks. All these have their advantages and disadvantages. Like you can push but not pop. You can, you can do this but you can't seek. These all have different trade-offs as far as performance goes. I thought I was using these. Let me take a quick look again. I might have ended up scrapping it in favor of just a basic for loop. I do remember, oh yeah, maybe this is all updates. What is all updates? No, all updates. I think I initialized, oh yeah, here we go. It's a vector, yeah. All updates is a vector, part of this class here. I was going to say I thought I scrapped this, but I guess I didn't. So a vector, I think it operates, think of like a pinwheel, or like the Price is Right. You spin the wheel and the two arrows that are fixed point out whichever one is in focus. So this schedule is basically a big wheel, so to speak. It's actually not, but let's just act like it is because we use rotate. And to get to increment it, you use the rotate method, vector rotate. And I spent an enormous amount of time benchmarking this stuff using different data structures in here, and then also using your basic while loops, for loops with your I counters and things like that. Trying to find the most optimal way to approach this main game loop when it is densely populated with things that need to happen. So, like I said, landed on vector. Excuse me. And so here's basically how it all works. When the game tick is told, it goes through the schedule. Of course, pre-get your schedule size. If any of the updates need to be removed from the collection, they're gonna have this poof flag set, and that gets added to indexes to remove once this main loop is done. You don't want to remove it during a loop because it's highly inefficient. It has to reindex the whole loop or do whatever it is. Just the overhead of removing something during the loop is problematic, so don't do it. If an update like this melee thing, when I scheduled the update, you give it the time, the source object, what to call back. I think by default it assumes that an update is going to be repeated. Let's see what this last parameter is. Updater when you schedule. Yeah, interval. This is second to last. So when the emitter, this is a damage emitter, like a weapon, or say like a shield has a bash on it. Items in this game have damage emitters. Those are actually responsible for generating the damage. Get into that later. But the effective speed is essentially the weapon delay. So that is what happens. So it comes in here with an interval. So back in this loop, when here's where that tick is actually called, this go. So let's take a look briefly at the update class. So all updates holds a collection of update class instances, and of course go calls the function that was provided when you asked it to be scheduled, which is this thing here. So go happens. If the update had an interval, it updates the next call time because it needs to happen again. So here we go. The go gets triggered. Just some schedule counter stuff happens. Maximum of 2,000 or maximum of 2,000 schedules can be ticked in one game tick, and then it will sort of release, and because you don't want a super busy game tick to start slowing things down. This is sort of a throttle mechanism. If there's several, many thousands of ticks suddenly get scheduled, do 2,000 at a time, then essentially release, because you need to do your network socket reads and things like that to let network traffic go in and out. But ideally, that high volume of game ticks happening won't be sustained. It'll just be a spike and then go back down. So it'll knock out 2,000, release for a second, do 2,000 more, release for a second, and hopefully maybe after the second or third or fourth game tick, you've chewed through those, and whatever was super busy going on is hopefully calmed down. But who knows what can happen. But anyway, that's just a throttle mechanism. And then of course, after all the schedules, all the updates have been triggered, you iterate and go through whichever ones need to be removed. Sometimes you can schedule something with no interval, and that means that it's going to happen once and then it's going to go away, and that's done with it. So I hope you follow that. That is sort of the long and short of how the internal game ticking system works. There is a sleep somewhere that prevents this from running at 100% CPU. Pretty sure that's probably in game down here. Yeah, so here's the zone tick, and then of course there's the socket stuff I was saying. You need to release from the game work at some point and let your sockets read what they have. And there's a usleep 10,000. I haven't, just going through this now, it kind of occurred to me, maybe I could do something like, you know, the return from this zone tick is some sort of ratio of how busy it was. And if it was really busy, maybe I don't sleep 10,000. I mean, a usleep 10,000 is going to put you at like 0% CPU. Let's have a quick look. Yeah, so these are basically sitting idle. So plenty of, and I know I said in the first video we'll do some performance testing and demonstrate sort of how efficient it is and where it falls short. So I'm going to keep alive for my SQL connection. So that's the main game tick. Next is probably worth talking about the, what was it? The impulse system. Was that next? Melee combat. Yeah, let's talk about the impulse system before melee combat, because melee combat requires a little bit of knowledge of that. All right, so one thing that I knew right away before I was even laying the groundwork of this stuff is that I knew that there had to be some order, some rhyme and reason as game events happened, that other things could observe them and even alter them or cancel them. Let's see, what would be a good example? Let's have a look. Okay, here's a good example. So when you die, if you were casting a spell, if you're in the middle of casting a spell and you die, that spell needs to be interrupted. So, how does that work? Let's sort of walk backwards. So let's say you die from a melee attack. So let's say I'm going to jump right to it. I know we're going to be we're going to be quickly jumping into the weeds here. You might get lost. Bear with me. So actually, maybe we can illustrate this another way. So I mentioned there are various traits for an entity. Let's take another quick look at that. So level, body, melee, defense, drop, spellcaster. So spellcaster, that's what we're interested in for this example. When you're casting a spell and you are slain, your spell should stop. So spellcaster trait needs to know, or needs to hook into an impulse of when you die. So the nature of this declaration here is that this, remember, so one thing I didn't explain about traits, maybe you know it, maybe you don't. When you say this in a trait, you're actually talking about the class that is using the trait. So traits are not their own class. This is talking about this. So when we say this, just remember this is the entity, this is the NPC. Nothing self-contained about the trait itself. That's why you'll notice a lot of these function names begin with _spellcaster, because if I call them just this part, there's a chance that I may actually need to this set level. Lots of different traits need to readjust things when the entity level changes. And I can't just use this function over and over because it'll keep getting overwritten. These traits get integrated into the parent class, and if level has a set level and body has a set level and melee, they're just going to keep overriding each other, and it's just not going to work. So traits, the convention I've used is to prefix the trait function for spellcaster. It's also helpful when calling them from other places. I know what trait I'm dealing with if I need to go trace something down. But anyway, let's get back on track. So spellcaster, an entity, so this register impulses, well, where does register impulses come from? The NPC, maybe even be entity at this point, yeah, entity, has an impulse, where is it? It makes a new impulse system. Let me find it. This register impulses, entity. Yeah, gosh, where is that? Oh, it's a trait. Okay, so the entity has a trait impulse. All right, and okay, yeah. So this is what I'm looking for. All right. So remember, traits refer to their parent class entity. So register impulse. What this does, and let's go back to spellcaster for clarity. So this register impulses is saying that whenever an impulse that's called do cast spell is triggered, I want to know about it. And call this function spellcaster before cast spell. Priority is where in the stack this function lies in terms of importance. When we were talking about melee earlier, well, think about, I won't even use a code example here. I'll just use an illustration from EverQuest. You have, Divine Aura on you, which blocks every damage from every possible source. You just can't be hurt while you have Divine Aura. That Divine Aura buff, that effect, whatever you want to call it, that needs to be privy to every single possible source of incoming damage so that it can stop it, or it can nullify it, or whatever. Same thing here, and that's where this priority comes in from. So, going back on what I said about not using an example, from here, if, spells are effects, actually. The effect, effects, PHP, and I think it was called GM protection. Yeah. So, man, I gotta go deeper. Mods, prevent melee damage. So register impulse. So this class, this buff, this effect, wants to know whenever this entity has received a melee attack, priority 1. Like, I could actually technically go lower than that. Conventionally, I'm not going below 1 at this point. I'm usually, if I'm not sure where to put something, I'll go by increments of 20, or increments of 10, so that if down the road I need to put something in between 2 places in the stack, I at least have a granularity of 10 to work with for sort of, future growth. But anyway, receive melee attack, on before receive melee attack, I mess with the data that's being passed around in this stack, this params object. This is being passed from receiver to receiver to receiver. Anybody that wants to know about receive melee attack is getting this params object, and it can mess with it. In this case, I'm forcing the result to say that I blocked it. So with that in mind, we'll go back to spellcaster, and I hope you can figure out by now what's going to happen. So in the spellcaster trait, as a spellcaster, I need to know that when I die, something needs to happen. So I'm going to hook into this do death. This is priority 100 is sort of like, I've reserved priority 100 conventionally as the actual happening of the event. Anything under 100 is like something needs to happen before I die, like some sort of sanity check. Maybe I have a buff on me that saves me from death once, like the what is it in EverQuest? Divine Intervention. Yeah, buff that randomly has a chance to save you when you take a kill shot. So that's going to be somewhere under 100. It needs to be before the actual do death happens. Let me take you to where that happens. So dying is a trait of body. So when your hit points reach 0, you're dead. So actually no, I thought it was in body. Where would do death? Let's see. And a convenient side effect of this system is that I can search for stuff like this, do death, and I can see everywhere in the code that uses it. And now I'm going to try to find where I actually have priority 100. Okay, that just means that when you actually, so drop table, that means when I officially die, I'm going to do things like roll loot chances. And that isn't necessarily me as a player, that's entity. So if an entity has a drop table, they'll get it. Let's keep looking. Target, no. Okay, well maybe in this particular instance, there isn't a priority 100 event. It is part of body, so let's go here. So body death, yeah. So this dead equals 1. No, it's got to happen before, because somewhere this dead, oh, I bet that happens in the attack, maybe. Let's trace this down. So let's say receive melee attack. Okay, here it is. If the current hit point is 0, then you're dead. Now the question is, if I died, where is it firing off that I died? I mean, so when you die right here, oh, here we go, I see it. After receive melee attack. Let's see where this got hooked in. Alright, so I've got 2 sets of register impulses. The reason I do that is because I need to hook into receive melee attack here, and I need to hook into it again for a different function. And that is down here. So basically, the limitation of the system is that you have to do 2 register impulses. Not a huge deal, but that's what's going on here. So after I receive a melee attack, and after I receive spell damage, that's right here, I check if I'm dead, then actually broadcast to the entire entity, anybody that wants to know about dying, that you have now died. Oops, hold on. Cat wants to get in. Alright, so we broadcast that the entity has died. Alright, so now let's go back to Spellcaster. So a do death signal went out, and because it's priority 110, anything that had a chance to stop the death should have already fired by now. So we can say with a good amount of certainty, or we can say with certainty, that the entity is actually dead. We probably do a sanity check in here anyway, maybe not. So we assume we're dead, we're actually dead, so we don't even bother doing like, if this dead. Don't need to do that. We're going to assume that we are dead, because it was a priority 110, it's after the death actually happened. So it's a pretty simple code here. If there's a cast in progress, broadcast an interrupt cast, or a broadcast that we need to stop whatever we're doing. And at that point, I believe the spellcaster trait is going to be the recipient of that broadcast. We broadcast it out to the entity, interrupt cast, priority 100. So this is like your responder. This is where the actual interrupt is going to happen. This is kind of the illustration I was trying to make earlier, where this is where a priority 100 actually happens. So cast in progress is not null, then actually do the interrupt. So that is a basic sort of flow of how an entity or different portions of the entity can hook into the impulse system to be notified of things that happen. Let's have a quick look at impulse again to make sure I covered it thoroughly enough. Again, this impulse stack, this impulses collection, needs to be maintained, needs to be as lean as possible. Because it's being called frequently, or could potentially be called a lot, just in melee combat. Melee combat sends out a lot of signals. Attack starts, dodges, things like that. So impulses are a fundamental concept in this engine. This is something I designed for this. I didn't really have a template in mind prior to this, but I'm pretty pleased with how it works. It's fit pretty much all the use cases I've had for it. I feel like it's pretty versatile. Spells and effects can hook into it, just like we explored earlier in the first video. That's just some debug stuff. Normally, like when I do a wipe command and I basically despawn an entity, part of that is, of course, deleting that entity from the zone server. So all this stuff can be garbage collected and whatnot. Unregistering impulses for it. Pretty self-explanatory there. Yeah. So we'll call that good for impulses now. Oh, let me cover impulse formats. That was something I started adding. I've used it a little bit. I'm not sure that it's the best idea from a performance standpoint. It's good for clarity and readability. What I mean is that, remember I talked about this param object that gets passed up and down the stack. That is what I'm talking about here with this add impulse format. So here we are back in Spellcaster. So I add impulse formats for impulse stack items that seem to be spellcasty. And by spellcasty, I mean if it's up here as a priority 100, it probably warrants being the owner for it, and thus making an add impulse format for it. And all this does is when an impulse is fired, all it does is make sure that the params object that gets passed around is guaranteed to have these properties defined in the params array. I said params object a second ago. It's technically an array that gets passed around, or an associative array, if you want to call it that. Definitely not an object. Objects are too expensive to instantiate every single time, so they're just I guess, I don't know if you call them hash table arrays or whatever. I just call them associative arrays. That's the vernacular I've always used and heard used. But every time if you were to just generate an impulse, like here, when something happens, you want to fire off a new impulse so that people who care about this get notified. Part of firing this off is, do I have an impulse format for it? Okay, I do. Let's make a new params object. Let's merge in these, and that's expensive. The other approach is don't do this, and I'm doing that in a lot of places. I don't have impulse formats for a lot of these impulses. Is to not do this and just assume an understanding, assume a downstream understanding. Let's say, for example, like here, when this let's probably give Manheels a bad example. People might not understand what that is. Give spell damage. So when you damage somebody, what you would be doing is you hook into the, you register the impulse for it. Let's see if this is a priority 100. It is. So this is what gets called when you, when like an effect or a spell wants to actually execute giving somebody spell damage. You notice here I pull out some things. Actually, I probably don't even need to. Oh no, here's what I'm setting. So I'm assuming that params from, it's just understood that params from needs to be this and params aggro needs to be that. Like, that's not really declared anywhere, or actually it probably is because I've done impulse formats, but otherwise in other places they're just kind of like this unspoken rule or an unspoken understanding of what needs to be there, and that could cause problems. But again, it's a performance thing. If this, I don't do impulse formats in high traffic areas specifically for that reason. It is a big noticeable hit. So I've just left it out, particularly in Melee. We might see that here in a second once I go back over to Melee and we actually talk about what I said I was going to talk about in this portion. So that's the basics of the impulse system. If you're still unclear on it, comment or something and I can maybe do a follow-up video on it. But I think I covered it well enough, I hope. Alright, so we'll stop talking about impulses and we're going to talk about, I'm going to shift gears pretty significantly. We're going to talk about melee combat. Melee combat is a very expensive, very frequent happening. Let me give you some UI action. It's been a while since we've done anything here in the UI. So let's, you know what, let's just back up here. We're going to aggro this guy. Boom. And yeah, okay, so he's chasing me. And I haven't demonstrated pathfinding, but I'll give you a little teaser here. Like, they can chase you up and down hills and whatnot. It's not perfect. There's big issues with it, but it rudimentary works on a rudimentary level. But anyway, you can see this guy is trying to hit me, but I keep blocking. That's because I have GM protection on. Let me click that off. And so now you can see he's actually doing stuff. So we know this is using the game updater. We covered the updater stuff. His damage is happening at specified intervals. Let's do a quick debug look on this guy, and we'll point that out. Although this is going to keep scrolling past every time I click on him. Okay, let's get rid of him. Let's wipe. All right. Oh no. Okay, we've got the debug stuff still. Okay, so let's look at what he had. All right. So his inventory. What was he hitting me with? Okay, so his inventory in his worn slot, slot ID 2, which is, I'm pretty sure that's his primary. He had a bare fist. Now, I actually have a bare fist too. That's a concept that I didn't cover when talking about items. The gist of it, maybe I can circle back to this, is called backup items, or an item slot has either something in it, or if you don't have an item in it, it has a backup sort of pseudo item. Let me get a drink here. In the case of primary and secondary, and I'll take you to the code in a second and show this, if there's nothing in primary, the backup item is called a bare fist, and here's its attributes. It's got some damage, and it's got some speed. 2 is every 2 seconds. Let's take a quick look at why I, as a paladin, have, let's see what I have in my backup slots. So, so impulse, set slot backup item. We won't get into that, but just roll with it. And the parameters are, for the primary slot, I want to create a bare fist. This is unique to the paladin. In my secondary, bare offhand block, which I think, if I remember correctly, I wanted that to be like a pseudo shield. I didn't want the paladin to have the ability to punch with both primary and secondary and essentially double attack, but I wanted him to have like the shield bash ability, whether or not he has a shield. I think that's what it is. Let's check what this is. Bare offhand block. Let's target myself, F1, get debug, and scroll up. Bare fist, bare offhand block, attack skill ID. I'm not sure what that is. Let's see what that is. I think it's skills 11. Yeah, okay, so it's a backup basher. Although I don't think it works. Let's test that real quick. I should be able to come over here and hit bash and see what happens. Boom. Bash requires a shield to be equipped in your secondary slot. Okay, well, some logic issues there. It should recognize that I have a bash capable backup item, but it doesn't. Big surprise, bug. add it to the list. But anyway, that was. I just wanted to show you the damage emitter that this guy had, where that timing was coming from, where that damage is coming from, because that's going to be important when we start talking about melee damage and damage tables and things like that. So again, so this guy respawned after I wiped him. That's why he's back. So he's trying to hit me. I almost forgot where I was going with this. Let's go back here. Melee. Okay, maybe I was just introducing all this stuff. So he's attacking me. This is just one guy. So let's talk about the performance implications here when there's lots of stuff. Let's make entity. I forget what this guy is. Let's do something super low level. An orc citizen. 402. Okay, so let's make 10 of them. So now there's 10 of them. They're all stacked on each other. I think I can get them to unstack if I attack them. I'm probably going to take a lot of damage because I don't have GM protection on, but let's just see. Oh, I would have to aggro them one at a time, but I can do a fake rampage and do /ramp1, hits them all with 1 damage, and let's say, okay, so now they're all unstacking. You can see, starting to ramp up the number of combat rounds that are happening every 2 seconds. Let's speed this up. I can do a thing called Mass Effect, which basically buffs everybody in the zone with whatever I want. Let's give them Haste 4, which is one of the bigger hastes. So now, they're attacking me 2-3 times a second. There's lots of stuff going on here. Let's take a sneak peek. Oops, what happened? Oh, I'm dead. Okay, so it stopped. Let me become alive again and put the GM protection on because I need this to keep going. Apply X GM protection. There we go. And I'll ramp 1 again to get them all attacking me again. So here, now I'm blocking all the time. Alright, so let's look at top. Let's see how we're doing performance-wise. And equals PHP, speed every 1 second. So pretty decent. 1% CPU, average over 1 second, no big deal. But really, this isn't a lot of stuff going on. You see some spam here. This is the NavMesh server updating positions and stuff. So I wanted to show you how many impulses are being fired just with 10 orcs attacking me. Granted, they all have haste, but I mean it's hundreds and hundreds. Like I said, that impulse system in the game updater becomes very heavily loaded very quickly, so it needs to be highly efficient. So I knew this was going to happen. I knew combat events were going to be happening a lot, especially on, say, like raid events or things like that. So before I even started writing the combat routines, I was thinking about how it needed to be optimized. Let me take off GM protection. I'm probably going to get wrecked here. Not too bad. I'm level 30. They're all level 5. But I am taking damage. So let's just stop them. So when they hit me, when they swing at me, there's, as you would expect, there's a lot of calculations that happen. Okay, I'm level 30, they're level 5. The damage emitter on this, let's do the get debug thing again. Go up to his damage emitter. The damage rating on his fist is 1. That's not literally 1 damage. Forget the word I'm looking for. That's just a number. That's just an abstract number. Things like, what is his strength? What is his agility? Because entities have all these things. Up here I'm looking at, his stat collection. Here's his agility. He's got 70 of that. He's got, baseline values for everything. But anyway, all these attributes eventually need to play into this, because put some piece of equipment on yourself that increases your strength, well, now you need to be hitting a little bit harder. But, you know, like I said, there's going to end up being an inordinate amount of ifs and checks, and like if you got an item in every slot and every item has strength attribute on it, does that mean that like every item gets a chance to mess with your damage values? And now for one melee swing, you're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 18 more people that are trying to hook into this melee attack event, and that's just going to get ridiculous. So you can't go that route. I guarantee you wouldn't scale. So I concluded that when it comes to melee damage, giving melee damage, and even taking melee damage, I needed to pre-compute as much as possible, particularly all this stat-related things, all the stat-related stuff, even buff-related things. So let me introduce you to what is called the damage table. Every entity has a damage table, and the basic nature of the damage table is that based on the things you have equipped, based on your stats, based on your buffs, and essentially anything else that I want to code in later, a lot of the damage calculations become pre-computed. At least the things that can be pre-computed, because you don't always know who you're going to attack, but you do know you do know that you're the attack source. So I know what I'm holding. I know what my strength attributes are. So given those things, let me get a weapon, a rank 30 weapon. So 35 damage. Again, an abstract number, doesn't literally mean 35 damage. When I put this on and even take this off, my entity's damage table is being reevaluated and regenerated. It's only happening once. That's the optimization. So let's see if I can. I don't know if I have a dump. Oh, I do. Dump damage table. Cool. Oops. Oh, come here, break. It might be too big. I've had an issue where really large collections of things don't like to come back. Although this could be, I might need to like include my name. Shoot. Let's see what's going on here. Console commands, dump damage table. Damage table, get table, JSON preprint. What is null? Let's see what's happening here. This table, return this table. Let's dump it to the console instead. You didn't think this was actually going to go smoothly the whole time, did you? Oops. Restart. Gotta wait a second for a few more lines. That means the zone mesh server is done. I can't log in until that happens, otherwise I get some errors. There we go. Alright, so target myself, dump damage table. It's empty. Why is it empty? That's very odd. Can you see, or the target? Damage emitters. Oh. Okay, so damage table is tied to an emitter, not this thingamabob. Sorry, necessary sidetrack. I must have been working on... Oh, I'm not even looking at the right thing. Damage table isn't what I... this damage table I'm trying to debug, this is like aggro-related stuff. If 5 people are attacking this dude, his damage table will maintain who's attacked him the most. For things like, you know, who gets the XP at the end of the kill. The other one, let's see if the other one is actually... Oh, hit table, that's what it was, not damage table. Oh, sorry for that waste of a detour. Okay, so here's the hit table. Using the wrong verbology the whole time too. So my entity's hit table looks like this. So I'm level 30. I pre-computed a bunch of things related to attacking entities of other different levels. So if I'm going to attack a level 30, if I'm level 30 attacking a level 1, my base damage, and this again is before a few other things, this is like before the taking entity has a chance to mitigate. I have a bare fist on, so I'm not doing much damage. I think the bare fist base damage is 1 or something. So like because he's level 1 and there's like, you know, the way I've coded the damage curves is that, you know, I'm doing 4 times more damage because I'm so far high, so much higher level than he is, and the chance to hit him is 90%. And you can see this continues. You know, me attacking a level 4, 5, 6 keeps going up and up and up. And let's see if it ever starts changing. Why would it not change? Hit chance. This is me, right? Let's see what happens if I put... Yeah, it doesn't seem right. Okay, so I put the rod on. Let's... Okay. Alright, this looks better. I wonder if I was dumping its hit table, not mine. Anyway, let's look at this again now that I have a weapon actually on. There could have been something funky with that backup emitter too. I'll have to check on that. So I'm level 30, attacking a level 1. This 35 damage practice rod has a computed sort of damage of 155. Now, again, like I said, the taking entity can potentially dodge this. They can potentially mitigate it further based on their armor. They'll get all their rolls, you know, quote unquote. Their you know, if this were D&D, they would get their rolls when they get notified that they've got incoming damage. So this continues to scale down as mobs get closer and closer to my level. So let's say I'm a 30 attacking a level 30. I'm down to 105. Now hit chance still seems really, really high. I'm not sure why that is. There is a global hit chance thing. I might have been screwing with that. Yeah. I'm not sure why that is so, why my chance to hit is so high. I think I might have been messing with that because I wanted to, I was doing some performance testing of something on, like, you know, the whole taking melee damage code path, and so I wanted everybody to be hitting all the time instead of lots of misses. I don't know. Who knows? I'll go back and fix that later. But the point is, this is the damage table. If I add something with strength, so let's do that. So none of this armor actually has strength on it. So let's wipe worn, and let's find an item set, which reminds me, I want to show you guys that at some point. This stuff's Holy Blessed Vision stuff. This is like supposed to be like a high-end set. Multi-grant. There we go. So this has lots of stats on it. Now I'm hoping this isn't going to make a liar out of me. Because I have more damage. Actually, let's focus on the 30 attacking a 30. So let's see what my hit table is now with some higher stats, more strength, things like that. I need to get that rod back. I think it was a 30. I hope it was a 30. Yeah, 35. All right. Don't hit me. I think that was just for me. Let me do it again. Don't hit me. So 30 attacking a 30. Do I know what I'm talking about? Apparently I do not. Strength might not actually affect it. Oh, is there strength? Yeah, there's strength. 90. I'm up to 95. Let's take a look at the code. So the gist is, the optimization is when you put an item on, or take an item off, or put a weapon on, or put an item off, or when your effects come and go, part of that process is regenerating your hit table. So, for example, here in the melee trait, melee trait wants to know when you put an item on, because, let's see what happens. What do you know? Where did I thought we regenerate? We add a damage emitter, and I bet you it happens then. Oh, wait, again, damage tables are part of emitters, not the entity. Yeah. We need to find the emitter. Where is that? In the damage emitter class, of course. Is it here? What the heck? This get damage, item attributes damage. Oh, wait a minute. 30. No, I was thinking something else, but that's not right. Alright, I need to find where the heck I put the damage table. Alright, not hit table, damage table. Here we go. Yeah, it is an emitter, jeez. But where is it being regenerated? So melee. Okay, it's not on the equip item. So equip an item. That just says if it's a weapon or not. Things need to know, and then, okay, yeah, this makes more sense. Whenever your entity's attributes get adjusted via this impulse, fire this off. Look at the parameters, and if any of the changed parameters are in these, if it's dex, strength, or haste that has been adjusted, if it's not any of those, return. If it is, then generate the hit tables. Let's go there. Alright, and as expected, for each of the damage emitters, like I said, the hit table is in the emitter, but let's check why strength why it wasn't having any effect. And I think that's simply because I'm not calculating it in stat bonus multiplier. So let's see what that does. Yeah, I was, but I'm not right now. I don't know why I commented it out. But this is where you would put in, damage increases based on the attributes. So, long story short, the code was there commented out, so that's why changing the strength of the items didn't do anything. But let's do rank 40 rod. Let's see what I got. I got a 50. Rank 50. Alright, so at a level 30 attack and a 30 was 105 base damage. This is a long illustration for something you probably already understand at this point. So dump, hit table. So now a 30 attacking a 30 outgoing starts a bit high, 150. And yeah, so like I said, so when the melee round happens, all this work here, when I generated in the melee, damage emitter, yeah, no. Did I close it? Come on. Oh, right. Generate hit tables. Alright, so all this work of figuring out my level, their level, how much my strength is going to increase my damage, how much my dex or whatever buffs I have are going to affect my damage. All that work doesn't need to happen anymore. And that is the big optimization. Even particularly the misses. I can hit a 29 slightly more than a level 30, by 0.005 chance or whatever. Before, of course, their dodge chance. All that stuff is pre-computed, and it doesn't have to happen every time you swing your weapon. So with that in mind, let's do some bigger melee tests. 200, let's do 50. This is probably going to start getting chuggy because I'm doing a full screen capture plus this stuff. So rampage 1. Alright, so now there's 20 guys all attacking me. They're probably going to keep pushing me up in the air. So yeah, like there's so much spam that the text is being pushed out of view every round. Let's have a quick look at the load. Speed everyone. Command PHP. So we're still 1 to 3. Now, granted, it's spiky because it's everybody's swinging once, and then nobody's doing anything for a second, and then everybody's swinging it. So it's balancing between 1 and 3. I made a buff specifically to combat this, so I can see more of a smoothed thing, and that is Mass Effect. I think it's called Random Haste. Haste Random. Haste. And that gives everybody a dynamic, different amount of haste so that you start to see sort of a more realistic game flow of damage going around. So let's have a look at that once that's happened. So we're hovering more around 3 to 4. So those spikes were apparently much bigger than just 1 to 3. So we see a smooth usage. There's a 5. Yeah. So again, this is, was it 50 mobs? I forget what I made. But that's a lot. But then again, you're in a raid of 54 people. Everybody's putting out damage. That could be a lot. Now, the server I'm running this on is nothing too great. Let me stop because that's an important factor here, the ability for this server to chug through this stuff. We'll look at the product. So it's a Opteron, not bad, but it's old. It's pretty old, and it's only 2.2 gigahertz. I think it's an 8-core. Let's check it out again. 8-core, yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if I call this good or bad. I mean, yeah, it's 50 guys, and they all have random amounts of haste. Some of which is like up to like 300% haste or something. Let me see what exactly I did. Oh, from 10% haste up to 350% haste. It's 4 minus 1, because 1.0 is regular haste, I think. So, yeah, highly unlikely that mobs or even players in the game are ever going to have 450% haste. So this 50, you could arguably say, is more like 100, maybe even more, if some of these have 200, 300, 400% haste. The amount of melee swings happening would be more along the lines of, again, like 100 or 200 entities all attacking at the same time. So let's stop them. But if I had to be doing those rolls, those chance checks, the figuring out the damage each roll, it just wouldn't. It would be nuts. It would peg out so fast, it'd be ridiculous. Now on the receiving end, let's have a look at that, because I honestly forget how much work is done there. So that's probably going to be in the defense. Let's get this saved so I don't forget about it. It's going to be in the defense trait. So there's a handful of things that happen on incoming. I guess let's exercise some of our knowledge here. Let's search the code base for anybody who wants to know about receiving a melee attack. So we've got a handful of buffs that want to know about when melee attacks happen. Those are buffs, so those probably aren't going to apply, because we probably don't have those buffs on us. Let's look for things that are like native to the entity. So NPC has some stuff. Skills have some stuff. Those probably like, let's do a check to see if your one-hand slash is going to skill up. Smarts, let's breeze over that until later. I'll talk about smarts later. Your body trait obviously wants to know when you receive a melee attack. That's the priority 101. That's where you're going to actually change the hit points of receiving a melee attack. Defense, okay, so that's about what I expected. So let's have a look at defense. Let's see what happens when you receive a melee attack from defense. So defense wants it to know at priority 70. So before you as a damage receiver actually take your damage, your defense trait wants to know about it and call this function. So if something, so at this point, we look at the param result. You remember in the GM protection effect, we alter the param result and set it to melee result block at priority 1. That is checked here, I guess, or no. That specifically, the melee result block isn't checked here. But if it's, let's see, if something already derailed the hit, don't need, yeah, so if, let's say you had an effect that increased, a buff on you that increased your dodge rate, and that, that effect hooked in at a priority 60 or something, and it made its roll, it's going to set param's result to melee result dodge, or melee result parry, or something like that. So if the result at this point, before receive melee attack, if it's not going to land, if something already caused it not to land, hold on. If something already caused it not to land, then we don't need to do these defense checks. Completely pointless to do that. We don't need to check and see if we need to parry it or riposte it, or if our defense skill you know, rolled high enough to mitigate some damage. It doesn't matter. But let's say it hasn't been derailed. It is a melee result hit or something like that. So at this point, we give our defense mechanisms. And this is a whole separate subsystem that I've got mixed feelings on, but I've kept it for now. Let's bring this up because it is relevant here. So this, I made it its own system for performance reasons. That's essentially why. I didn't want, say like you've got a defense skill. You've got, if you're a paladin, you've got dodge or defense, you've got dodge, you've got parry, you've got riposte, and those are all in the skill system. Wrong file. Skills. Skill. Yeah, these are all defined here in these things here. Let's look at dodge. Now I could build these out, and I could hook into the appropriate events to do before receive melee attack, and I could do the rolls in here and, you know, affect that params that's being sent up and down the stack and mess with that stuff here. But it's another thing. It's every single entity is going to have these, or may or may not have these skills. That whether or not they have them isn't the point. But the point is, it's a lot of extra impulses registered in a code path that is being very frequently used. So I opted to externalize defense mechanisms into this defense mechanisms namespace. So if you're, for example, a paladin, let's see how we get those in here. We have the skills for them. They're not being used. We just looked at the code. There's nothing in here. That's actually in my log to resolve this issue. But I am curious at what point they are added. So this is a paladin trait. Maybe the hint will be in here. I want to make sure I understand this before moving forward, so I don't misquote myself. PHP traits. It might be in this. No. I could have sworn it was in here. Skills. This is all skill stuff, though. Let's do NPC. It might be that every NPC... Oh, defense. Yeah, defense trait. Here we go. So when this trait is initialized, I pull in the appropriate... So, again, this is actually not very ideal either, because it assumes that every entity is going to have these, and that's not necessarily true. For example, a lot of classes in EQ don't get riposte or parry. Monks get block, but they don't get parry, I don't think. Paladins actually don't traditionally get block. That was a monk thing too. So this is a bit overly static, but let's roll with it. Again, for the purposes of performance, this is the route that happens. So in the melee attack, where were we? There's body, receive melee attack. That's where we were. No, it wasn't. Where were we? We were at, shoot, lost my train of thought here. It's called check defense mechanisms. Oh, it was on... Bear with me. Was it body? down here? Oh, it was defense. Yeah, okay, we were in the defense tree. So on before receive. So we're going to try the defense mechanisms. So we know we're going to get hit. We have a handful of defense mechanisms here the whole time. I've been looking for it. We know we have all these defense mechanisms. Let's let each one try. And try is just a simple, roll your chance. And again, it's a static roll right now. This is not how it's going to be ultimately. This is all just hard-coded really high for some reason. Oh wait, no, it's a 5% chance. Yeah, it's greater than 95. They get a chance, and if they win their chance, they screw with the params object and set the result to whatever the appropriate result here. And so they all tried. If they all failed, if it's not melee result land, this doesn't really make sense. If it's not land, return params, otherwise return params. Okay, that might be something worth changing. But you get the idea. The defense mechanisms get their shot in lieu of being another thing that hooks into the receive melee attack thing. So that's what happens. So you get your chance to dodge, riposte, parry. One of your defense mechanisms is the armor mitigator. That's how we determine how much damage to shave off based on your AC. Pretty simple routine here. Some explanations of how that actually happens. And then I have just a debug line that spits up some stuff here. Yep. So that's the basics of what happens when you receive a melee hit. Let's just check one more place in the event stack. Let's see. Let's look at the skill info stuff. So skill info is wanted to know when you receive a melee attack. So what happens on before? So we're looking at, okay, in this particular search result that I clicked on, apparently there's only one skill currently that wants to know before I attack, and that is the skill shield block. Let's see what happens. So if shield block is enabled, oh yeah, okay. So this is a good example of a defensive thing, a defensive mechanism, not defense mechanism quote unquote from here, but a skill, shield block, that is actually fully coded out and will affect defensive behavior. So if you're a paladin and you're about to get hit, you have a chance based on your skill level. This is actually a much better example. You have a chance based on your skill level to block the result, to change the param result to block. Let's go through this. So we're notified about before the melee attack at a priority 90, so before it actually happens. And so this shield block skill extends what's called a skill chance table. There are several different kinds of skills. A skill, I'm gonna hope you understand some EverQuest stuff here. You know how like when you're swinging a sword in EverQuest, your offensive skill goes up, your one-hand slashing skill goes up. Based on your class, your double attack skill may go up. That's just a simple number. You usually get 5. Your ceiling usually goes up by 5 per level. So by level 2, you have a possible 10 of 10 of your skill. That 10 doesn't mean anything specifically. Again, it's just an arbitrary number. That number gets rolled against some other formula to determine if that skill contributed to whatever the action is. And that's exactly what's happening here. So my point in explaining that is that there's a skill and then there's a skill chance table. So a skill chance table applies to things, to skills that can trigger other unique events. So you notice any of the ones that have skill chance table, if you look at what they are, they have a chance somewhere between 1 and 100, or 0 and 100, to actually do something different. Whereas these other ones, do not. Some of these arguably could. Actually, no, I take that back. There's nothing about one-hand slashing, or one-hand blunt skill. Like, every time you swing with a one-hand blunt, there's nothing in this skill that's being rolled that might actually happen. You might be thinking, oh, what if you have double attack? Well, that's your double attack skill down here, and that is a chance table. So when you would take a swing, if you have a double attack skill, based on its value, it gets a chance to roll, and if it wins its roll, then it gets to do its thing. In this case, it does a bonus melee attack, to whoever using a particular emitter. Let's go back to the shield block. So, or let me finish explaining skill chance table and skills. So, skill chance tables are used for skills that trigger things, trigger events, and the other skills are simply sort of a 1 to n representation of what your skill value might be. An example of how you would use a basic skill, one-hand slashing. So let's say you're always using one-hand slashing and your max, your level, 20. That means that your skill is going to be 100 of 100 if it's, if you get 5 per level, if I did that math right. But what might one-hand slashing affect? Accuracy. Again, that's not doing anything new. So let's see if maybe that. Yeah. So I do hook into the give melee attack. I hook into that, but I'm hooking in after the melee attack priority 120. I'm not sure why priority isn't over here. It's usually where I put it, but this is just a simple skill up check. I could further attach to this give melee attack, and I could do a function where if the your native chance to hit, if we pull up melee, there's a global melee chance that you will never hit, at least outgoing, you will never naturally miss more than 50% of the time. That's pretty high. It'll probably go down. But then, of course, the receiver might be 10 levels above you, and that's going to affect your accuracy once they get their chance to do their rolls. So ultimately, your melee accuracy is probably going to be lower than that. But my point is, here in these basic skill tables, you may hook into these events, and if your skill does its roll, and whatever your formula is, if you've got 100 out of 100 one-hand blunt, maybe that means that every swing you add 5% chance to hit to your native accuracy. That's just an example. Won't go too much farther with that. My voice is wearing out, so I'm going to wrap this up soon. But these are the ones, these skill chance tables. These actually do something. If they have a roll function. The skill, where's the skill chance table? You can tell this chance table, do a roll and tell me if I won my roll. And you can adjust those rates based on what the skill is. Fairly configurable there. But I was illustrating earlier shield block. This is an example of a defensive skill that hooks in to receive melee attack. We went down here again. So our chance had our roll. If the roll failed, then just you're done with the params. You're not going to change anything. Just return them, and the next thing in the impulse stack gets to go. Otherwise, if you pass your rolls, you force the param result, the melee result block. And the shield block, I coded it slightly different than EverQuest. In EverQuest, you just have a flat chance to block a result or block a melee swing. And here, if I remember how I coded this, so you rapidly block. You block at a pretty high rate up to a certain number of blocks, and then you have like this cooldown period. So imagine if like, 3 guys are attacking you. The idea is that you throw your shield up and you block 4 out of the next 5 hits really rapidly, but you can't just stand there with your shield up all the time. You gotta fight back. So your blocks increment. If you reach your max, then it sets the skill, and this is all native to this particular skill, this block unlock time. That is not like a base class thing. Basically just locks you out of being able to block again for a little while. And then of course, since you successfully block something, it calls a base class try increase, so that maybe you went from 51 of 100 to 52 of 100 on your skill there. So that's basic skill stuff. You might revisit skills at some point, yeah, because there are some things here in the UI I want to show with skills. There's much more to it than that. It's a system I spent a fair amount of time on, because it was one of those things where, like, you play these games, you play particularly EverQuest, and it's easy to gripe and moan about things. It's like, oh, this stupid skill doesn't even work. I've, leveled up 20 times on it. I'm like 500 dodge, and like I never dodge. It's like impossible to tell if this thing's even working. Like, and it's easy to moan and things about that, moan and groan about things like that. But I wanted to build this out completely, fully, so that I fully understood the intricacies of a fully fledged skill system, and you can start to appreciate the complexity of skills and how skill checks are done, and of course you add your own personal flair in there on how to implement your own skills and improve them. But yeah, I mean, if you don't take the time to really think through a feature or an aspect of the game, you really don't have a leg to stand on when it comes to complaining about it. So yeah, so I spent a lot of time on the skill subsystem, because it really is a big portion of the RPG aspect of a game, particularly a fantasy MMO type thing. Increasing skills is it's progress, and we can get into the philosophy of MMORPGs and what makes them interesting and things like that. There's so much to talk about in that regard, but we'll wrap this one up for now. I'm not sure how long this has gone on, but hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back with another one sooner or later.